Chapter 1, The Darkness is My Mirror. The crash had been a symphony of twisted metal and shattered glass, a realistic nightmare that left Elena Sterling in a world of absolute, velvety black. Or so her husband, Marcus, believed. For 6 months, the doctors called it cortical blindness, a psychological response to the trauma of the accident. For 6 months, Elena sat in her high-backed chair in their glass-walled Connecticut mansion, a silent wife staring into a void that didn't exist. The hook was the morning the light returned. It hadn't come back with a flash, but with a slow, agonizing crawl of gray shapes that eventually sharpened into the captivating and terrifying reality of her life. Elena had been about to scream with joy, to call out for the man she loved, until she saw him. Marcus was standing just 3 feet away, looking at her with a clinical, detached coldness. He wasn't the grieving, attentive husband the world saw. He was checking his watch, his face a mask of unique boredom. And then, the door opened. Sloane, Elena's own business attorney and supposed best friend, walked into the room. She didn't offer a greeting, she offered a kiss. Elena watched through her blind, unblinking eyes as her husband pulled another woman into his arms right in front of her. "How much longer, Marcus?" Sloane whispered, her voice a jagged glass edge against Elena's nerves. "The board is getting restless. They want her signature on the merger, or they want her declared incompetent." "Patience, darling," Marcus replied, his hand trailing over the back of Elena's chair, his fingers inches from her hair. "The accident was supposed to take her out completely, but this is better. A blind, mute witness to her own undoing. She's the perfect vault, she hears nothing, says nothing, and sees, absolutely nothing." The conflict was a physical ache in Elena's chest. She wanted to claw their eyes out, to scream that she could see the betrayal etched in every line of their faces. But a tragic realization held her tongue: if they knew she could see, she wouldn't survive the night. To Marcus, she was a liability that refused to die. To survive, she had to become the very ghost he thought she was. "She's staring again," Sloane remarked, waving a hand inches from Elena's dilated pupils. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She focused on a point of light on the wall, turning her eyes into "The darkness as my mirror." "She's a statue, Sloane." "A beautiful, expensive statue," Marcus said, his voice dripping with fascinating cruelty. He leaned down, his breath warm against Elena's ear. "Isn't that right, Elena? You're so much easier to love when you're broken." As they walked out of the room, laughing softly about a life they planned to build on her grave, Elena's vision stayed sharp. She watched them through the reflection in the darkened window. She saw the way Marcus slipped a thumb drive into his pocket, the one that held the keys to her family's legacy. The suspense was just beginning. Marcus thought he had the perfect victim, but he had created the perfect spy. Elena wasn't just a wife anymore, she was a witness. And while Marcus was busy planning her funeral, Elena was beginning to plan his unique and destruction. Chapter 2, The Sound of Betrayal. The night was Elena's true theater. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the mansion's automated lights dimmed to a soft, golden amber, Marcus's guard dropped completely. To him, the darkness was merely a backdrop for sleep; to Elena, it was the fascinating veil that allowed her to move without a mask. Elena waited until the rhythm of Marcus's heavy, rhythmic snoring drifted from the master suite. She sat up, her movements fluid and silent, a realistic contrast to the fumbling, hesitant woman she played during the day. She didn't reach for her cane. Instead, she let her eyes adjust, her pupils drinking in the moonlight that spilled across the limestone floors. She moved like a shadow toward Marcus's private study, the room that was strictly off-limits to the blind wife. The conflict hammered in her throat as she stepped past the threshold. This was where the sound of betrayal had originated, and she knew the paper trail would be just as loud. She found his desk, a slab of polished obsidian that looked like an altar to greed. Elena didn't turn on the lights. She used the soft glow of his multi-monitor setup, which sat in sleep mode. With the steady hands of a surgeon, she began to sift through the unique and orderly stacks of documents. She found them buried in a false bottom drawer. Medical reports that had never been shared with her. One was from a private investigator Marcus had hired a week before her car crash. The tragic truth was laid bare in black and white. Marcus hadn't just been cheating, he had been stalking his own wife, looking for a way to untether her from the sterling fortune. Then, she saw the signature pages. Dozens of them. Marcus had been practicing her signature, the ink strokes identical to her own. He was forging a bill of sale for the sterling shipping lanes, her father's life work, transferring the entire entity to an offshore shell company owned by him and Sloan. "You've been very busy, Marcus," she whispered, the words a cold, captivating promise in the dark. Suddenly, the floorboard in the hallway groaned. Elena froze. The suspense was a physical blow to her lungs. She didn't have time to put the files back. She heard the soft thud-thud-thud of bare feet on the carpet. Marcus was awake. She dropped to the floor, sliding under the massive obsidian desk just as the office door swung open. The lights flickered on, blinding her for a split second. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to remember the role. She had to be the blind wife who had wandered off in a state of confusion. Marcus stood in the center of the room, his shadow stretching over her hiding spot. "Elena," his voice was a realistic mix of suspicion and irritation. "Are you in here?" She felt his presence move closer to the desk. She could see his feet, the expensive silk pajamas, the arrogant stance. If he looked down, the unique revenge she was planning would end in a violent confrontation she wasn't ready for. "Elena, I know you wandered off." "The floor sensors tripped," he muttered. Elena took a deep breath, crawled out from the side of the desk opposite him, and stood up, her eyes wide, glassy, and fixed on the far wall. She let her hands roam the air in front of her, her fingers trembling. "Marcus," she whimpered, her voice a tragic masterpiece of vulnerability. The walls moved. "I couldn't find the bathroom. Everything sounds so different at night." Marcus stared at her, his eyes narrowed, searching for a fracture in her facade. He walked right up to her, his face inches from hers. He didn't speak. He reached out and slowly moved his hand toward her eyes, a sharp, sudden motion intended to make her flinch. Elena didn't blink. She let her gaze remain hollow, looking through him as if he were made of glass. "Damn it, Elena," he sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. He took her arm with a captivating and false gentleness. "You gave me a heart attack. Come on, back to bed. You shouldn't be wandering around in the dark. You'll hurt yourself, again." As he led her back to her room, his grip on her arm felt like a shackle. But Elena felt a surge of unique power. She had seen the forgeries. She had seen the PI reports. Marcus thought he was leading a sheep back to the fold, but he was walking hand in hand with the woman who was about to burn his world to the ground. Chapter 3, The Ghost in the Mansion. Marcus Sterling was a man of absolute routine. He believed in the permanence of objects and the predictability of his environment. That was his greatest weakness. To break a man who thinks he is a god, you don't attack his body, you attack his reality. The ghost in the mansion began with the small things, the unique and maddening inconveniences that slipped through the cracks of a busy mind. While Marcus was in the shower, Elena moved his cufflinks from the dresser to the bathroom sink. When he went to pour his morning espresso, she had already moved the silver spoon to the opposite side of the tray. I could have sworn I left my keys on the hook, Marcus muttered one Tuesday, his voice edged with a realistic frustration. Elena sat in her usual chair by the window, her eyes vacant, her hands resting limply in her lap. Is something wrong, Marcus? You sound scattered. I'm fine, he snapped, his eyes darting around the foyer. He found the keys sitting in the middle of the dining table, a place he never frequented in the morning. He stared at them for a long moment, a flicker of suspense crossing his face before he brushed it off as stress. But Elena was just warming up. The captivating part of her plan required her to be a shadow. She began to use the house's internal intercom system. During the day, she had observed the unique frequency of the house's smart hub. Late at night, she would whisper into the nursery monitor in the guest wing, a room Marcus avoided because it reminded him of the family he never wanted. I saw the fire, Marcus, she whispered into the transmitter, her voice a distorted, tragic hiss that echoed through the vents into his bedroom. Marcus bolted upright in bed, his chest heaving. Who's there? The house was silent. He checked his phone, the security cameras showed nothing but the still, dark hallways and the blind wife sleeping soundly in the adjacent room. He rubbed his face, his unique arrogance beginning to fray at the edges. The conflict escalated when Sloane came over for a business lunch. They sat on the patio, just feet away from Elena's sun lounger. They spoke in low tones, assuming her world was limited to the sound of the wind. He's starting to act twitchy, Sloane, Marcus whispered, nodding toward the house. He thinks he's seeing things. I think the pressure of the merger is getting to him. You're talking about yourself in the third person, Marcus, Sloane remarked, her voice sharp. Get it together. Once the signature is verified by the notary on Friday, we're out. We'll move her to the facility in Vermont and never look back. Elena felt a surge of fascinating rage, but she kept her breathing shallow and even. As they moved inside to grab a bottle of wine, Elena acted. She slipped out of her lounger and replaced Sloane's expensive designer sunglasses with a pair of cheap, scratched ones she had pulled from a tragic box of old donations in the garage. When Sloane returned, she reached for her glasses. She froze. What the? Marcus, where are my Chanels? They're right there on the table, he said, not looking up from his phone. No, these are garbage. These aren't mine. Sloane looked at Elena, then at the empty garden. Marcus, someone is in this house. The suspense was a living thing in the air. Marcus stood up, his face pale. He walked over to Elena and grabbed her shoulders, shaking her slightly. Elena. Did anyone come by? Did you hear anyone? Elena let her head loll back, her eyes rolling behind her lids before she focused them on nothing. Only the birds, Marcus. And the woman who keeps crying in the walls. Don't you hear her? She says the brakes didn't fail on their own. Marcus recoiled as if he had been slapped. The unique terror in his eyes was the most beautiful thing Elena had ever seen. She was no longer just the silent wife, she was the architect of his haunting. He thought he was the one in control, but he was merely a guest in a house that was slowly turning against him. Chapter 4, Sins of the Architect. The psychological glitches were breaking Marcus's spirit, but Elena knew that madness wouldn't hold up in a court of law. She needed realistic and irrefutable proof. To get it, she had to venture into the belly of the beast. The high-tech garage where her wrecked luxury sedan sat under a heavy tarp, a tragic monument to the day her life was supposed to end. Marcus had kept the car, claiming he was too sentimental to scrap it, but Elena knew the truth. He was keeping it to ensure no insurance adjuster ever looked too closely at the onboard computer. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, while Marcus was at a merger meeting with Sloane, Elena discarded her vacant stare. She navigated the service stairs, her vision sharp and predatory. The garage smelled of motor oil and cold metal. She pulled back the tarp, and the sight of the crushed front end sent a conflicting jolt of trauma through her. But she didn't look away. "You tried to bury me in this," she whispered, her voice a captivating edge of steel. Elena wasn't just a socialite, she was the daughter of an engineer. She knew that modern cars were essentially black boxes. She crawled into the cramped, glass-strewn footwell, ignoring the way the jagged plastic bit into her palms. She found the port beneath the dash and plugged in a diagnostic tablet she had intercepted from a delivery meant for the estate's mechanic. The screen flickered to life, the blue light illuminating her face in a unique and ghostly glow. As the data began to stream, the sins of the architect were revealed in lines of glowing code. The suspense peaked as she found the timestamp, 5:14 p.m., 10 minutes before her crash. A remote command had been sent to the car's electronic control unit, ECU. The command was simple: override brake assist. Lock steering column. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was a digital execution. Suddenly, the heavy motorized garage door began to groan open. The conflict turned into pure, heart-pounding terror. Marcus was home early. Elena scrambled out of the wreck, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She barely had time to throw the tarp back over the car and shove the tablet into a box of winter tires before the black SUV pulled into the bay. She didn't have time to get to the stairs. She did the only thing a blind woman would do: she sat on the floor next to the wreck, her head buried in her knees, shivering. Marcus stepped out of his vehicle, his face twisted in a realistic mask of agitation. He saw her and froze. "Elena? What the hell are you doing down here? It's freezing." He walked over, his boots crunching on the stray glass. He grabbed her arm, his grip tighter than usual. "How did you even find your way to the garage?" I followed the smell," Elena sobbed, a tragic and convincing performance. "It smells like the day the world went dark, Marcus. I just wanted to touch the car. I thought if I touched it, I might remember why the brakes didn't work. I'm so scared." Marcus looked at the tarp, his eyes narrowing. For a captivating moment, he looked like he might pull it back and see the diagnostic port still warm from her touch. He leaned down, his face inches from hers, searching for any sign of unique intelligence in her eyes. "The brakes failed because the car was old, Elena," he hissed, his voice a ruthless reminder of his lie. "Stop looking for ghosts. There's nothing left in this car but scrap metal and your own bad luck." He dragged her to her feet and led her back toward the house, but he didn't see the fascinating glint of triumph in her eyes. She had the data. She had the proof that he was a murderer in a tailored suit. The sins of the architect were now recorded, and that a silent wife finally had the weapon she needed to deliver the killing blow to his reputation and his freedom. Chapter 5: The Silent Observer. The mansion was transformed into a glittering theater of deception. Marcus had organized a high-stakes dinner party to celebrate the upcoming merger, inviting the very board members who held the power to strip Elena of her legacy. It was a realistic display of his arrogance. He wanted to parade his broken wife in front of the world to prove she was no longer fit to lead. Elena sat at the head of the long, candlelit mahogany table, dressed in a captivating gown of silver silk. She looked like a ghost at her own feast. Beside her, Marcus played the role of the devoted, tragic hero, cutting her meat into small pieces as if she were a child. "It's a tragedy, really," Marcus sighed to the chairman of the board, a man named Henderson who had known Elena's father for 40 years. "The physical wounds healed, but the mind, she's drifted away. I'm just trying to keep the sterling name alive through this merger." "You're a saint, Marcus," Henderson remarked, though his eyes held a tragic flicker of doubt as he looked at Elena. The conflict deepened when Sloane, sitting directly across from Elena, raised her glass. "To the future of Sterling Vane. And to Elena, the heart of the company, even if she can't see the heights we're about to reach." The unique horror of the evening was the way they spoke about her as if she were furniture. Under the table, Elena felt a soft pressure against her leg. It wasn't Marcus. She focused her blind gaze forward, but her periphery caught the movement. Sloane was playing a captivating and bold game of footsie with Marcus, right there under the Sterling family crest. "The notary will be here at 10, Marcus whispered to Sloane, thinking the clinking of silverware drowned his voice. "I've got the power of attorney papers ready. Once Henderson sees her deterioration tonight, he won't challenge the signature." "Is she sedated?" Sloane whispered back. "Double dose," Marcus lied. Elena hadn't taken the pills. She had tucked them into the cheek of her mouth and spat them into a napkin. She was the silent observer, her senses heightened to a fascinating degree. She could smell Sloane's cloying perfume, hear the frantic tapping of Marcus's finger on his wine glass, a telltale sign of his suspense, and see the predatory way they looked at the clock. The twist came when Henderson leaned toward Elena. "Elena, dear. Your father always said you had the best instincts in the business. Do you have any thoughts on the merger?" The table went silent. Marcus's grip on his steak knife tightened until his knuckles were white. The suspense was suffocating. Elena let a slow, tragic smile spread across her face. She turned her head toward Henderson, her eyes wide and unblinking. "My father said, he said the Sterling name should never be sold to a man who fears the dark. But Marcus loves the dark, don't you, Marcus? He finds so many things in it." The conflict was electric. Marcus laughed nervously, his face flushed. "She's rambling again. The medication makes her imaginative." "I think I see a light," Elena continued, her voice a unique and chilling whisper. She reached out, her hand clumsily knocking over a glass of red wine. It spilled directly onto the white lace sleeve of Sloane's dress. "Oh!" Sloane shrieked, jumping back. "I'm so sorry," Elena murmured, her eyes fixed on a point 3 inches above Sloane's head. "I thought I saw a shadow moving toward you. I was trying to catch it." As Sloane rushed to the powder room and Marcus apologized profusely to the guests, Elena caught Henderson's eye for a split second. She didn't blink. She gave him a look of such realistic and sharp intelligence that the old man gasped, his wine glass hovering halfway to his lips. He saw the fracture in the facade. Marcus leading the guests into the library for the signing, his hand trembling on Elena's arm. He thought he was minutes away from victory, but the silent observer had just planted the first seed of doubt in his strongest ally. The revenge was no longer just a plan, it was a living thing, moving through the house like the shadows Elena claimed to see. Chapter 6, The First Crack. Marcus was a man who lived by the precision of his files. To him, paper was power, and his desk was his throne. But as the clock ticked toward the finalization of the merger, the throne began to crumble. Elena knew that to shatter him, she had to strike at the center of his realistic world, his secret ledger. While Marcus was busy smoothing over the wine incident with the guests in the foyer, Elena slipped into the library. She didn't need a light. She had memorized the layout of the room during her midnight silent observer raids. The unique twist of her plan was simple: she wasn't going to steal his forged documents, she was going to improve them. She pulled the diagnostic report she had downloaded from the car's computer, The Sins of the Architect, and tucked it into the middle of the Power of Attorney folder. She replaced his practiced, Elena Sterling, signatures with photocopies of the actual crash reports. The first crack is always the deepest, she whispered, her voice a captivating ghost in the library. When Marcus returned, ushering the notary and Henderson into the room, he was brimming with captivating arrogance. He reached for the folder with a flourish. Now, let's put this tragic chapter to rest and look toward the future of Sterling Vane. The notary, a stern woman with thick glasses, opened the folder. The suspense was a physical pressure in the room. Elena sat in the corner, her eyes vacant, playing the tragic role of the hollow wife. Mr. Sterling, the notary said, her voice dropping into a conflicting tone of confusion. What is this? It's the merger agreement, Marcus said, his smile tight. No, the notary replied, sliding a paper across the desk. This is an ECU diagnostic log for a brake system override. And this looks like a police report for a vehicular assault. The conflict exploded. Marcus's face went from smug to a realistic shade of gray. He grabbed the paper, his hands shaking. That shouldn't be in there. It's a mistake. A filing error by my assistant. Your assistant is Sloane, Henderson said, his voice cold and unique in its growing suspicion. And she told me she checked these files herself. Marcus scrambled, flipping through the pages, but the more he searched for the merger, the more tragic evidence he found. Photos of the car's engine, the PI's report on his affair, and a handwritten note in Elena's perfect, actual script that simply said, I see you. I don't understand, Marcus stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at Elena. She was sitting perfectly still, but for the first time, she allowed a tiny, fascinating smirk to play at the corners of her lips. Is something wrong, Marcus? Elena asked, her voice soft and melodious. You sound like you've seen a ghost. Or perhaps you've just lost your place in the story. You. Marcus hissed, stepping toward her, his ruthless mask completely shattered. What did you do? I'm blind, Marcus, she reminded him, her eyes wide and hauntingly empty. How could I do anything but listen to the truth? The notary closed her briefcase. I cannot notarize these documents, Mr. Sterling. There are significant irregularities. As the guests and the notary filed out, leaving a trail of suspense and whispered accusations, Marcus was left standing in the center of the library, surrounded by the physical evidence of his crimes. The first crack had widened into a chasm. He looked at the papers, then at the silent wife, and for the first time, a flicker of unique terror took root in his heart. He began to realize that the woman he thought was a statue was actually the one pulling the strings. Marcus frantically tearing the papers to shreds, unaware that Elena had already sent the digital originals to the local police precinct. The revenge was no longer a shadow, it was a storm, and Marcus was standing right in the center of the lightning. Chapter 7, The Mistress's Mistake. The mansion felt like a sinking vessel, and Sloane Sterling was not the type of woman to go down with the ship. While Marcus paced the library, nursing a drink and drowning in his own paranoia, Sloane decided to collect her severance package. She knew the location of the Sterling family vault, a reinforced room hidden behind a false panel in the master suite's walk-in closet. Inside that vault sat the unique and priceless legacy of Elena's mother, a collection of flawless diamonds and a sapphire tiara that was worth more than Marcus's failed merger. The conflict was silent as Sloane slipped away from the chaos downstairs. She thought Elena was still in her tragic stupor in the library. She didn't realize that the silent wife had anticipated this exact mistress's mistake. Elena was already there, tucked into the deep shadows of the velvet-lined closet, her fascinating eyes wide and sharp. She watched as Sloane punched in a code Sloane had likely pried from Marcus during one of their unique afternoon trysts. The heavy steel door swung open with a hiss of pressurized air. Sloane gasped, her eyes reflecting the captivating glitter of the jewels. Finally, she whispered, reaching for the velvet boxes. A little something for the trouble of dealing with you two. It's beautiful, isn't it? Sloane shrieked, spinning around. She dropped a diamond necklace, the stones clattering like ice on the floor. Elena stepped out of the shadows, her silver gown shimmering. She wasn't fumbling. She wasn't staring at the wall. She was looking directly into Sloane's eyes with a realistic and terrifying clarity. Elena? Sloane's voice was a tragic squeak. She waved a hand in front of Elena's face, her fingers shaking. You can't see me. You're blind. I see a thief, Elena said, her voice a calm, captivating hum. I see a woman who tried to help my husband kill me. And right now, I see a woman who is about to be trapped by her own greed. The twist was the unique security feature Elena's father had installed, a feature Marcus had never bothered to learn. It wasn't just a vault, it was a gilded cage. Marcus! Sloane screamed, lunging for the door. But Elena was faster. She hit the manual override button inside the closet. The vault door didn't just close, it locked with a series of heavy, mechanical thuds that echoed through the room. Sloane was trapped inside the 6x6 steel box. Elena! Open this door. I'll tell everyone. I'll tell them you're faking it. Sloane hammered on the steel, her voice muffled and tragic. Tell them, Elena whispered, leaning her forehead against the cold metal. But the vault is soundproof, Sloane. And the oxygen is on a timer. You have exactly 2 hours of air, unless I decide to call the police. And I think I'll wait until Marcus joins you in the guest of honor list. The suspense shifted as Elena heard Marcus's heavy footsteps approaching the bedroom. He was calling for Sloane, his voice thick with a realistic mix of fear and whiskey. Elena didn't panic. She smoothed her hair, sat back down in her velvet armchair, and let her eyes go hollow and vacant just as the bedroom door burst open. Sloane. Where is she? Marcus demanded, his tie undone, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at the closed closet door, then at his blind wife. Elena. Did you hear Sloane come in here? I heard a bird fly into a cage, Marcus, Elena said, her voice a unique and haunting lilt. It made a very loud sound. Like metal hitting metal. Is the bird important? Marcus stared at the closet. He saw a stray diamond from the dropped necklace glinting on the carpet. The conflict in his mind was a storm. He realized the vault was closed. He realized his mistress was gone. And as he looked at Elena, the woman who seemed to know everything while seeing nothing. The first crack in his sanity turned into a total collapse. With Marcus falling to his knees, clawing at the closet door, while Elena watches him with a captivating and silent triumph. The mistress's mistake had provided the perfect bait, and the ruthless husband was finally realizing that he was the one who was truly blind. Chapter 8, The Confrontation in the Dark. The house felt like a pressurized chamber. With Sloane trapped in a vault and the evidence of his crimes mounting, Marcus had crossed the threshold of realistic desperation into a manic, unique cruelty. He didn't try to open the vault, he was too consumed by the chilling suspicion that his perfect victim was actually his greatest executioner. He cut the power to the entire wing. The mansion plunged into a thick, suffocating blackness. I know you can hear me, Elena, Marcus's voice boomed through the dark, echoing off the high ceilings. It was a tragic and distorted sound. And I think you can do more than hear. I think you've been watching me drown and enjoying the view. Elena sat in her armchair, her heart drumming a fascinating rhythm against her ribs. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She used the moon's faint silver glow to track his silhouette as he paced the room. Then, she heard the unique and terrifying click of a safety being switched off. "Let's play a game," Marcus whispered, his shadow looming over her. "A game of shadows. If you're really blind, you won't flinch when the light comes back. And if you're faking, well, a blind woman wouldn't see the gun pointed at her heart, would she?" The suspense was a physical weight. Marcus pulled a high-powered tactical flashlight from his pocket. He stood directly in front of her, the barrel of the pistol cold and captivating, as it brushed against her forehead. 1, 2. On 3, he slammed the flashlight on, the beam a blinding, white-hot spear of light aimed directly at her pupils. The conflict inside Elena was a war. Every instinct screamed at her to squint, to turn away, to save her retinas from the searing pain. But she remained a silent wife. She kept her eyes wide, staring through the light, her pupils dilating naturally as if they were nothing more than broken shutters. She didn't flinch. She didn't even breathe. "Nothing," Marcus breathed, his voice a mix of realistic relief and terrifying disappointment. He lowered the gun slightly. "Maybe I am losing my mind. Maybe you really are just a hollow shell." But then, he stopped. He leaned in closer, the unique smell of whiskey and sweat filling her lungs. He moved the gun down, tracing the line of her throat. "But if you're blind," he whispered, his voice dropping into a ruthless hum, "you won't see me doing this." He slowly squeezed the trigger. The click of the empty chamber echoed like a cannon blast. He hadn't loaded it. It was a test, a captivating and cruel psychological probe. Elena didn't react. She let a single, tragic tear track down her cheek, but her gaze remained as vacant as a winter sky. "Marcus?" she whispered, her voice a masterpiece of realistic confusion. Why did the light turn so cold? And what was that sound? It sounded like a door closing forever. Marcus stepped back, the gun slipping from his fingers and hitting the carpet with a dull thud. The first crack was now a total shattering. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He was a man defeated by a ghost. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, a tragic and hollow sound. "I'm so sorry, Elena. I've lost everything. The merger, Sloane, my mind. I have nothing left but a wife who can't even see the monster I've become." "I can't see the monster, Marcus," Elena said, her voice a unique and chilling promise. "But I can feel the darkness. And the darkness says it's time for you to pay the debt." The chapter ends with Marcus slumped in the chair, broken and weeping, while Elena stands up in the pitch-black room. She didn't need the light to find her way anymore. She walked past him, her steps silent and sure, heading for the phone in the hallway. The confrontation in the dark was over. The silent wife had won the game of shadows, and now, it was time for the final light of justice to be turned on. Chapter 9, The Veil is Lifted. The pre-dawn light was a bruised purple when the flashing red and blue lights of the Connecticut State Police fleet crested the driveway. The silent wife had made her final move. She hadn't just called 911. She had sent the entire digital archive of Marcus's crimes, the ECU data, the mistress's recordings, and the forged merger papers, to the district attorney's office with a unique and untraceable timestamp. The mansion was swarmed. Officers moved through the glass-walled halls with a realistic precision, their boots thundering on the marble that Marcus had thought was his fortress. "Marcus Sterling, you're under arrest for attempted murder, grand larceny, and corporate fraud," the lead detective announced, his voice a captivating roar. Marcus didn't fight. He was a shell of a man, still sitting in the library, his eyes unfocused. He looked tragic, a king whose crown had turned into a noose. But the conflict wasn't over. Wait. Elena's voice cut through the chaos. She was standing at the top of the grand staircase, her silver gown now a suit of armor. There's one more thing. My best friend is in the master suite closet. She was trying to help herself to my mother's jewels. The police opened the vault. Sloane stumbled out, gasping for air, her face a mask of realistic terror and smeared makeup. She didn't even look at the jewels she had dropped, she looked at Marcus with a unique and burning hatred. He made me do it. Sloane shrieked as the handcuffs clicked shut. He tampered with the car. He told me he'd kill me too if I didn't help him forge the signatures. You lying bitch. Marcus surged forward, but the officers held him back. The suspense reached its peak as the two traitors began to tear each other apart, their captivating alliance dissolving into a pathetic brawl of accusations. Elena descended the stairs, her movements slow and deliberate. She walked right up to Marcus. The police stepped back, sensing the fascinating gravity of the moment. Marcus looked up at her, his lips trembling. Elena, please, he whimpered. I was out of my mind. I love you. You can't see what they're doing to me. Tell them I'm a good man. Elena stood inches from him. The unique twist was the silence. She let the silence stretch until it was deafening. Then, she reached out and took his chin in her hand, forcing him to look up. I see a man who thought I was a statue, Elena said, her voice no longer a whisper, but a realistic and resonant command. I see a man who thought he could hide his sins in the dark. But Marcus. I haven't been in the dark for a long time. She leaned in, her eyes focusing on his with a captivating and terrifying sharpness. For the first time, she let her pupils track his movement. She let him see the intelligence, the rage, and the absolute revenge reflected in her iris. You can see. Marcus gasped, his face turning a tragic shade of white. You saw everything. I saw the way you kissed her in my room, Elena whispered, her words a unique blade. I saw the command you sent to my car. I saw the way you looked at me when you thought I was broken. I saw it all, Marcus. And the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, is you in those handcuffs. The veil was lifted. The revelation hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. He began to scream. A tragic and guttural sound of a man who realized he had been living with a predator while he thought he was hunting a lamb. As they dragged him toward the door, he looked back one last time. Elena didn't wave. She didn't cry. She simply stood in the center of her father's house, her vision clear, her head held high, and the silent wife, finally, gloriously, spoke the last word. Goodbye, Marcus. I'll see you at the trial. And trust me, everyone will be watching. Chapter 10. The New Vision. The courtroom was silent as the judge handed down the sentence. For Marcus and Sloane, the tragic journey of greed ended with decades behind bars, a realistic consequence for a crime that had aimed to steal a life. As the bailiffs led them away, Marcus tried to catch Elena's eye one last time, but she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her unique revenge was complete. 1 year later, the Sterling Vane sign was torn down, replaced by a gleaming logo that simply read, Sterling Legacy. Elena stood on the balcony of her new penthouse in the city, the beautiful American skyline sparkling before her. She was no longer a ghost in a glass mansion. She was the CEO of a company that now prioritized safety and ethical engineering, turning her father's vision into a global standard. The happy ending wasn't just about the business, it was about the light. Elena had used her settlement to fund a national foundation for victims of vehicular trauma, providing the same diagnostic tools she had used to find the truth. She was a woman who had reclaimed her sight, her voice, and her soul. Beside her stood Henderson, the old chairman who had become her mentor. "Your father would be proud, Elena. You didn't just save the company, you saved the name." "I didn't do it alone," Elena said, her eyes warm and fascinating in their clarity. "I had to learn to see the world for what it was, not what I wanted it to be. The darkness taught me more than the light ever could." She looked out at the horizon, a unique sense of peace settling over her. She was a woman who had been traded, broken, and blinded, yet she had emerged as the architect of her own destiny. The silent wife was gone, replaced by a leader whose vision was as sharp as her resolve. As the sun set, casting a captivating, golden glow over the city, Elena smiled. She had seen the worst of humanity, and in doing so, she had found the best of herself. The revenge was over. The new vision had begun. Thank you so much for following the journey of The Silent Wife's Revenge. He thought I was blind, but I saw everything. We hope this story of psychological suspense and unique justice has kept you on the edge of your seat. Elena's triumph reminds us that the truth can never stay hidden in the dark forever, and that sometimes, our greatest strength is found in what others choose to ignore. Now, it's time for the discussion. Did you suspect that Elena could see from the very beginning, or was the veil lifted a surprise to you? What was the most captivating moment of her revenge, moving the keys or trapping Sloane in the vault? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this fascinating and realistic 2026 romance thriller, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more audiobooks featuring beautiful American characters and high-stakes drama. Hit that notification bell so you're the first to hear our next release. Until next time, keep your eyes open, you never know who might be watching.